welcome back. Oh, with the sun shining, people might be putting their boats in the water. Hey, Paul.
Hello, Ben.
How you doing?
Fantastic.
Good. Paul Pukis joins us with Mosaic Insurance Alliance, who is also the author with Amy Drull of Protect Yourself. As we said, we have an author-filled hour today. Well, Paul, welcome back.
Thank you.
You just got done with your Coast Guard tour.
Yes.
Do they call it a tour when it's the Coast Guard?
If that sounds better, we can call it a tour. It's my 2 weeks of active duty service in the reserves with the Coast
Where'd you
Guard.
go?
Just across the lake here in downtown Seattle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you really toured.
Yeah.
Right on.
I toured the office for 2 weeks.
Thank you for your service with that. That's very cool that you're doing that. Well, you went across the lake, and you probably drove, but, a lot of people are out boating on lakes, aren't they, these days?
It's the season.
So tell us a little bit about boating insurance in Washington, because it's not like insurance for a car. It's quite different.
Well, I think the biggest difference is, do you need it or do you not need it? And this topic came up when Heather and I were chatting a couple days ago via email, where it was just, she grew up in a family where insurance was always important, and they had it on their boat. And she was surprised to find out that insurance on a boat is not required in this state. So that got us to talking about a good topic of conversation for today's show, because people are getting their boats out, pulling the tarps off, pumping up the tires on the trailer, whatever the case is, to get the boat back in the water.
And pumping up, now that's an interesting thing, pumping up those tires. I remember when I was a kid, and before I was able to use a boat, we had to take this boater safety class, right?
Yeah.
Which is more common now. I think you have to do it.
Yep.
And, pumping up the tires is actually extremely important with the trailer. This is for the person
having properly inflated tires on anything that goes down the road is important. Yeah. So
I actually, the reason I remember it so well is when I was like 10, it asked,
it's hard to move.
Well, it's hard to move, but no, when I was 10, I had like the question, should they be overinflated, underinflated? And I thought they should be flat for some reason. I was 10. Okay. So now you do have these mandatory boaters education cards.
Right.
And so do you see people being more responsible than with insurance because of that? I mean, has there been a caveat to it or catalyst for it?
I haven't seen that personally. I think that the folks that were still finding insurance something that made them sleep better at night, knowing that they were protected if anything happened to their precious boat or to something bad hurting another person out there or bumping into another boat. If it was still important to them before the required card, it's still important to them now. So a lot of that hasn't changed from what I've seen.
Well, I could see that. I would just think, as people you're kind of forced to become a little bit more responsible. And and insurance is really, it's a responsibility game then with boaters.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks just feel that it's something that it's not required, like auto insurance. And Heather even mentioned talking about the different things that where insurance is required in this state. And we talked about before that insurance is not required on your auto, even in this state. But there's a way around that. That's right.
And tell us what it is, because it's kind of funny.
Well, you need to have proof that there's $50,000 in basically an escrow account to take care of any accident that might happen. So the answer to the trivia question is no. Auto insurance is not required in this state. However, you do need to provide the officer proof of insurance proof of insurance, or that you've got $50,000 sitting in a set-aside account with the state. The state provides you a little card that says, yes, you've got $50,000 sitting in an account.
So it's actually a card. You don't drive around with your bank statement.
Correct.
Well, that's okay.
Correct.
I didn't realize that. I figured I was always laughing if the cop pulled you over, you whip out your bank statement.
Yeah. No, that's that probably wouldn't fly.
How that would go over. So is boaters insurance? It's totally separate, right? I mean, it's not included in your car or your house policy. I mean, it's just a boater's policy.
That's a good question. There are some. The general rule of thumb is yes, a boat policy is going to be separate if you want the term, kind of full coverage on your boat. Your homeowner's policy will provide some liability to small boats, ones that are more powered with oars, so powered by humans.
The yellow inflatable.
Yeah, that type of thing. The canoe is probably the most common example, or the little rowboat. But anything that you're going to take out on the lake that's got, a sizable horsepower motor on the back, or an inboard outdrive type ski boat, little runabout type thing, that should have a standalone boat policy. And they're not expensive. They're not.
We're here with Paul Pukis with Mosaic Insurance Alliance. And Paul, we're going to continue on this, but we're also going to get, you're a big baseball fan, right? I don't mean to jump off topic, but you're a pretty big baseball fan.
We can always jump to sports.
Okay. But you have some of your own tickets you're going to give away in just a little bit to a caller into the show. So we'll get to the first caller. You're going to give away tickets to 888-298-KKNW. That's 888-298-5569 for Paul's own personal Everett Aqua Sox tickets. So we'll give those away to the first caller.
First row.
That's first row.
Doesn't get any closer to the action.
Wow, that's right there.
That's a great.
With parking.
With parking.
Yeah, I'll toss it in there.
Done. So again, give a call. First caller gets those tickets for Paul Pukis's.
There's 3 of them.
Three tickets to the Everett Aqua Sox. Any game?
Any game that I have the tickets for that haven't been taken already.
Done.
And the season just started, so you got a pretty good chance of picking a good game.
Perfect. Well, Paul, that's great. And then, so let's go back to the insurance plans and options people need to consider then with the, when it comes to boaters and whatnot.
Yeah, and then I want to take it just a step further. That might be something that's more important to folks to think about when it comes to boating stuff. But a boat policy is very similar in structure to a car policy. You've got liability coverage in case you hurt somebody. You've got comprehensive and collision type coverage if you hurt your boat. One of the more expensive parts of the policy, because boating or boat insurance is not required, is uninsured or underinsured boater coverage. Because there are so many folks out there, even more than drive on I-5 without insurance, people out there with no insurance on their boat, the uninsured motorist or boater policy, part of the policy, is typically more expensive because that's normally what's going to pay out, because people without insurance are typically going to be the ones that run into you and damage your boat, whatever the case is. You can also get emergency service. If the boat dies out in the middle of the lake, your policy can cover you to get towed back in. So there are different things like that.
Those are what the good old oars are for. I think everybody has that experience of someone on the front of the boat, on the bow, rowing.
For a couple miles.
For a couple hours.
Well, and if you're out, for seafair coming up, you could probably find somebody to tow you in. But there is coverage for that if you need it.
The towing coverage for thou who runs out of gas in the middle of the lake.
That's right. Insurance does cover poor decisions. Put it that way.
All right, so let's keep going then. So what are some other big options then that people need to think about?
Well, the one I want to touch on, we can use it, we can relate it to boat insurance, and that's typically when folks go on vacations. Coming up now, maybe when school's out, they'll go down to Mexico or whatever, and maybe rent some jet skis. It's actually a pretty common situation, but listeners need to be aware that your homeowner's policy provides liability coverage to something where you might hurt someone on a jet ski. That policy stops, though, when you cross the U.S.-Mexican border. If you have an umbrella policy, which we've talked about a little bit before on here, most good umbrella policies cover the insured worldwide. So if you are messing around in Cabo on a jet ski and somebody gets hurt, you bonk somebody in the head when they're floating around in the water, and a claim comes from it, you may not have any coverage if you don't have an umbrella policy, because the umbrella policy goes worldwide. Your home policy stops at the border.
Really?
Yep.
So then how do people know? I mean, if you start thinking about boat insurance or an umbrella policy, I mean, where is the line drawn of what's going to cover which?
Well, the boat policy would be on the specific boat that you have insured, just like your Ferrari in the garage, you've got insurance on that.
Totally.
So when you drive the Ferrari, you've got coverage on that specific vehicle. boat policy works the same way. You've got coverage on that specific boat when you use it. The umbrella policy will provide liability coverage for pretty much anything that you would use. The jet ski, a boat that you rent in Mexico, whatever, in Europe. If you travel over to the French Riviera and rent something to go tool around.
Man, Ferraris, French Riviera, you're all over it today, huh?
Well, we're talking to authors here, so, that donate the proceeds.
That's right.
So,
okay, so what are some other, I think the real point is you want to be safe on a boat before, no matter what. And I know with your book, Protect Yourself, you've talked a lot about being safe. What are some of those big tips you have for people as far as boating safety?
Well, that also comes up with my time in the Coast Guard.
Yes,
I'll bring
that's
that
true.
into play as well. I think the biggest thing is being prepared. Things can go wrong out on the water that you don't expect, and it's very different than things going wrong in a car where you're on dry land. You can walk to go get help. It doesn't quite happen on a boat. So being prepared, having the life jackets, having different things to make sure things are running, doing preventative maintenance, all that type of stuff leads directly to being safe on the water.
Again, we're here with Paul Pukis of Mosaic Insurance Alliance talking about being safe on the water, which, and you do, especially with kids. A lot of people take their kids on their boat, and I've seen it out there where people, the kids don't have life jackets on or things of that nature. It's kind of scary the way people treat the water.
Yeah, they don't respect it as they should.
I think that's the right word, respect.
Yeah. And you might be a great swimmer, but if you get knocked unconscious by being tossed over and hitting your head on something, I don't care how good of a swimmer you are. If you don't have a life jacket, that may be the last time.
And then, so what about some other things then that need to be on a boat?
Well, you want to make sure that you're checking the equipment, like the lights, if you're going to be running around.
At night.
Yeah, at night would be a good thing. Unless
it's funny, boats don't have headlights, though. Most don't.
No.
Small boats don't have headlights.
No.
I always wondered that.
Most big boats don't have headlights either.
They just have navigation lights. That's one of the requirements, is the two lights at the front and
the radar
side.
is the headlights.
Boats should have headlights, though? Never mind.
Sure. You can put headlights on your boat.
I actually bought one of those, those little, like, Canon light, flashlight deals. They're a big handled spotlight. Yeah, not a Canon light, but a spotlight. And so I remember having one of those, and you plug it in, but it didn't work very long because, the lighter, the cigarette lighter jack in boats usually doesn't last very long.
They get wet.
Yeah, they get wet. And anyways, so lighting is huge. Horn and sound. Even a whistle, I know, is actually required.
Yeah, you need to be able to make some noise for people that may be focused elsewhere than where the boat's going. To make sure that you can notify them or, reach them, alert them, whatever the case is. If things do go wrong, it's definitely good to have a first aid kit on the boat.
Also, I think a requirement.
Yeah, yes, with the life jackets for the number of people and all that type of stuff. Because I know a lot of my Coast Guard brethren will be out on the water for seafair, making sure folks are doing a good job, staying safe. That's what we're here to do.
It's the police who are making sure you're not having fun. You guys are there for the safety.
Yeah, they can have as much fun as they want as long as they're doing so safely.
Right.
You got it.
And seafares is certainly one of my favorite holidays, without a doubt.
I want to ask one question before we let him go. Sorry, I always have to interject when we're talking about boats, but I just find it confusing. This whole thing stemmed from my disbelief that people aren't allowed to have, aren't required to have insurance for the boats, because I've, heard of many accidents and tragic things happening that are just as costly and just as horrible as you can on the road. Do you have any insight or reasoning as to why it's not required for people to have boaters insurance?
Wow, that is a good question. Why it's not required?
I think it should be. That's my personal opinion.
I would say I agree with you. Not that, coming from an insurance perspective is the reason why, but I think from an overall
safety.
Yeah,
covering your
safety,
assets,
but also just
yourself.
making sure that people are paying attention to what's going on. That you might have more responsible folks in general. If insurance is required, they might take it a little bit more seriously, knowing that things could be affected. I think that without it, it's kind of the out of sight, out of mind type scenario that if they were reminded as much as we're reminded about auto insurance, about boat insurance, that people would take it a little bit more seriously. So I don't have an answer for your question about why it's not.
I'm gonna get down to it. I'm gonna do some research.
Find the good old insurance commissioner and see what's going on over there.
Yeah. But it's a good item. You know, the state's looking for revenue. Maybe they can find some by making that requirement.
Maybe then they could help build us a stadium. Paul, thanks so much for joining us again. Paul Pukis with Mosaic Insurance Alliance. Coming up, another author, Brian Gubernick, and his new book, All About Short Sales, will join us right after this break. You're listening to Brashenomics.